You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. Until today, it remains contradictory and hard to understand why the Chicago Appeal Court would decide to uphold the decision of the Trial Court of Illinois, which deliberately ignored the supreme law of this land when they chose to disenfranchise R. Kelly of his freedom despite the statutes of limitations that protected him. R. Kelly's lead appeal attorney Jennifer Bonjean did argue that by the time the Chicago case was opened against the R&B King, the statutes of limitations which existed back in the years during which he is alleged to have committed the sex crimes had duly expired, and this should have barred the prosecution from litigating on this matter in any way. However, the government argues that these statutes of limitations, whose existence at the alleged time of offense they do not deny, were eventually dissolved, and it was decided that an accuser may litigate if they are still alive. The criteria that the appeal judges could have followed to draw the conclusion that the government's argument is right is still questionable, considering it is now not just a U.S. but international legal principle that new laws do not necessarily affect acts that may have occurred in the past. This is embedded in the general principle of non-retroactivity of laws, which states that a law can only be applied to an act that occurs after the law was adopted. Meaning any dissolutions of the statutes of limitations that existed in the past may not affect acts that allegedly occurred during the existence of these limitations. If new laws cannot affect past actions, likewise new amendments to the existing laws cannot affect old events. The statutes of limitations that existed during the alleged period, therefore having expired years ago, should have protected R. Kelly from this rather fraudulent litigation that landed him in an endless jail sentence, which is also questionable on its own. A statute of limitations is a law that defines the maximum amount of time during which parties involved in a dispute must initiate legal proceedings following an alleged offense, and these durations do vary depending on the nature of alleged offense and the location of the jurisdiction. In R. Kelly's matter, statutes of limitations indicated 10 years, and all were duly expired several years before the Chicago case was opened. For the government to ignore these and litigate against R. Kelly, and for the courts of law to have also turned a blind eye to this legal malpractice, is an indicator of a bigger conspiracy that was intended to see R. Kelly locked up in prison for the rest of his life, regardless of whether he was innocent or guilty. In normal circumstances, no one ignores the law this blatantly and gets away with it, especially through the appeal court tribunal. There is no way an appeal court that hasn't been influenced by politics or any other forms of bribery can miss this. If a law did exist at the time R. Kelly allegedly committed some of the crimes he is charged for that suggested there can't be any litigation beyond 10 years, it must be followed, and R. Kelly shouldn't have been tried for these particular cases. Imagine instead the appeal court labeled this defense an attempt by R. Kelly to elude the charges entirely, after allegedly employing a complex scheme to keep victims quiet. Well, this is entirely their opinion, and while they have a right to it, the law says what it says. The court cannot justify their disregard of the laws of this land by simply presenting their personal opinions. And it doesn't matter whether they think it's a trick by R. Kelly or not. What is important is to follow the law. And what it says is that R. Kelly should never have been charged for these particular crimes if they were committed in the first place. There is in fact a very important reason why these statutes of limitations were instituted, and their eventual removal could have been a malicious act after realizing that the silent racial war against successful black people may not be as successful if the concocted crimes cannot be litigated. Remember, the game is to make sure that black wealth is not generationally passed down to the black descendants. What the racist doesn't want to see is black Rockefellers and J.P. Morgans owning majority shares in trillion-dollar companies such as BlackRock, Vanguard, Forexapro, and other stock exchange market players that could see black people influence federal and global policies to threaten white supremacy in the process. Considering concocting crimes to see the black warriors imprisoned for the rest of their lives and defrauded of their wealth is the strategy, certainly the statutes of limitations were a major hindrance, and their removal was a big score by the oppressor. There must be a way to arrest these black celebrities in their old age and charge them with sex crimes they didn't commit, but with these limitations it's impossible, and therefore they had to be dissolved. This is why any young or upcoming black artists who may be blind to this racist strategy, many need to think again and realize that they are the next target after R. Kelly. With the limitations removed, the oppressor can now charge any successful black celebrity for literally anything anytime, and cause them financial loss to make sure they all die in poverty with no wealth to be inherited by their children. According to Don Brown, anybody who argues against this just doesn't understand, likely because they are not the ones in the fire at the moment. However, as said, when it comes to matters of law, it shouldn't matter what personal opinions the judges hold. Their job is to interpret what the law says, and they too are obligated to abide by the same law. For them to have defied the statutes of limitations, which they also agree did exist at the time of the alleged crimes and duly expired before the Chicago case was filed, is not only a failure of court but also criminal in nature. These judges should in fact be held to account and asked to explain what came over them to cause this depth of injustice. According to Tony Claude, in fact, it has remained a puzzle just how the Chicago appeal judges managed to let this slide past their jurisdiction. Who allows the government to abuse the laws like that? They were likely bribed by Sony and other stakeholders in this matter who badly need R. Kelly behind bars. It's so absurd to see how the statutes of limitations, which were a major part of the US laws then and still are in other matters, can be completely ignored like they didn't matter. They need to understand that ignorance of the law is no defense, and therefore their lack of knowledge that the limitations do matter is entirely their fault. We shall therefore continue to advocate for R. Kelly's release, because this was far from being called justice. If you wish to take part in a live interview on this channel discussing any of these topics, let us know by emailing us on sashahnnewsroom@gmail.com for scheduling. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say? To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.